Today's guest is a dear friend of mine. I'm talking about Darrel Farris. He has been working as the field CTO for Melo, and he has been in the industry for over 20 years. By the way, Melo is a low-code platform for test automation and one of the important partners of Abstracta. I really had a fun conversation with Darrel. I hope you enjoy it as well. Hello and welcome to Quality Sense Podcast. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I am well, Federico. How are you?
I'm fine. Really excited to have this conversation with you. I've been waiting for this for a long time, and we finally are here having this, participation in the podcast thing. So thank you for accepting the invitation.
It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
I have some questions for you. The first one is more related to your background. I would like to, if you can give me a summary, how you became a tester. Why are you working in the software quality field?
Sure. Well, I didn't start in software testing. I really didn't start in software, actually. My first tech job was working at an internet provider back when we had banks of modems to manage. And so I was a sysadmin. I also did billing, things like that. But I had worked through mostly back-end things, configuration engineering, server stuff. And I had an opportunity to get a job in testing. I didn't really know what testing was at the time. But it sounded great. And so, I went in completely blind, as one did in those days in tech. And really learned on the job was how I got my start.
So it sounded great. It's not something that I typically hear. I'm really curious about how that person sold the position to you. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, we had worked alongside of each other at a company before. So she was the QA manager and I was the release manager. So I was putting together installers and things like that for our software. And she would have to test my installers and I would have to go fix my bugs. And so that was really how I got, I think, my first taste of what it really was, actively. But I had worked alongside of QA teams before and, knew their purpose and what they did and the struggles and strife that they faced. And and always appreciated their role. They always seemed to know, a large landscape of factors when it came to getting software out the door, because I was very much working more on the release side of things before I went into QA.
And do you think that even though today I understand you are not testing every day, every moment of your day, but do you think that your career as a tester influenced what you do today?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I am testing every day. I think it's kind of a switch you can never really turn off once you start doing it, especially in customer-facing apps, right? And UI and UX and things like that. Unfortunately, I'm always evaluating everything that I look at. But no, it definitely did. I think, when I go back and look at my resume over the years, what I see is me just popping around in different facets of software production and essentially learning, each of those roles or modalities by doing it. And so I think everything really led up to where I am today. And I think it's why I have so much of an appreciation or empathy, however we want to say it, for really everyone who has a part in building quality software.
Something remarkable about what you're doing today, or what I understand you're doing today, is that you have your feet on the ground, right? You really have a connection with the testing community. You also speak to your customers, to different companies that are in the that they have the need of improving their quality processes, or right. So most of my questions from now on are going to take advantage of that position. And maybe the first question I have related to that is, from your perspective, what's the most pressing need that most people have in terms of quality, right?
Hmm. I don't know if it's so much of a need. I guess they need more time. Is the pressing need. I think there's never enough time, and there's never been enough time. I think I've never worked anywhere where I'll just sitting around, just waiting for the next release to happen. But yeah, I think if we pull that back, it's really about teams needing new ways to find efficiency in their workflows and their processes and their tooling, so they can ultimately do more, deliver more value, get things in the customer's hands faster, right? All of these things are efficiency by a different name. So that's what I think teams really need, is efficiency.
Yeah, well, I typically say that needing more time or not having enough time is kind of a fallacy, because actually what's happening behind that is the need of prioritizing what you do, and you mentioned adding more value. So discovering probably is also related to discovering what things are providing more value to your customers, or to your team, or to the process itself, right?
Yeah, you have to know where to focus.
Mhm.
And yeah, and you have to have signs to look for. You have to know what those signs are. I think that's why, one of the, if we play back through my career, right, we've had all of these wonderful new trends. We went from waterfall to agile, right? And agile brought new efficiency and new modes of collaboration. And then DevOps, right? And DevOps made everything go so much faster and more predictable. And
Yeah.
and now, test automation and all of these things are coming in, and observability really had a big moment, still does. But all of these things are just baked into our workflows, and sometimes it's hard to appreciate, that there was ever a different way. But yeah, I see the same thing, Federico.
And what about misconceptions? Because many people come from different schools, let's say, or try to follow different methodologies or different trends that appear every other day, right? So, do you see like some patterns or some ideas that we should try to avoid, maybe something like that?
Um, I think for teams who or individuals who are new to test automation, I think there's often a slow down to speed up um, kind of advice that I give those people. We get very excited if we go through a little online course or watch some tutorial. I learned so many things through tutorials, and you're just like, I'm going to go implement this right now. I think what happens is I see teams bury themselves under work that they either can't maintain, or things get farther beyond what their knowledge scope is. So I say for those teams, just be mindful that everything you build, you have to maintain as well. And so, maybe to tie back to what you had just said, right? We have to know not only how our customers are getting value, but what are the activities that we as workers building software are also the ones that are adding the most value. So, and testing, we say, test, based on risk or impact to the business if something were to break. And I think those are mentalities that we have to learn as we come into automation.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No problem. Something important that you mentioned is that maintenance should be in the planning phase also, right? Because in many cases, even that's a problem, or something that I see on myself, right? It's like having new ideas and wanting to implement new things. But for something to be effective, you have to maintain it over time, at least for a while, right? So when you're planning to integrate some new tools or new practice, it's also important to plan, okay, how can I keep this practice, new practice or new activity over time in order to make it more effective, right? Not just being a small experiment that then is going to be a burden or a problem.
Mhm. Yeah, or be mindful of when something, that you experiment with all of a sudden becomes, oh, this was a good experiment. We should operationalize this now. But oftentimes you can't just go from an experimental phase into production with something. You have to harden it, you have to test it, harden your workflows and whatnot. As you were saying this, I was reflecting on my backyard, Federico, and we have half of the yard where we were very diligent and putting down weed barrier and all of these things and nice mulch, and that side of the yard is just lovely. It requires very little maintenance. It's got drip irrigation. The other side of the yard, we did not put down, the other things. We did not do every day. I'm back there, scraping things out, pulling weeds, wondering, how did this grow a foot? I swear it wasn't here yesterday. And that can be, what the process of building software can be like without good disciplines and good workflows, and good tooling and observability and all the things that, we've learned over the last umpteen years. What makes a good process, what makes something sustainable.
Sustainability,
Sounds like
absolutely. Maintainability and sustainability are like more or less the same thing in this way. I'm also planning doing some gardening planning here, and one of my requirements is that I love like mowing the grass myself and taking care of everything myself, but I don't want to spend every single weekend on that, right? So part of the planning or part of the requirement for that is that it should be easy to maintain for me, for my skills, for my tools, for the tools I have, right?
For your constraints,
Mhm.
right? You don't want to do this every day. You have other things that you like to do as
Exactly.
well, and other things you may want to explore.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, don't paint yourself into a box or a corner where, oh, you realize that now you can only do this one thing. And what does that mean? Is that the most valuable thing you could be doing with your time? Is
Exactly.
that the thing that can impact, your house, your family the most? This is a very good extended metaphor. I like this.
I love all the metaphors related to nature, so amazing. Really like that this one. Another question from your experience. What are the most important ingredients for a testing strategy to be effective?
To be effective. I think understanding both your internal requirements, for lack of a better word, of the software, but also really understanding how your users use your software and find different paths of value in that software, and then working to build a bridge between those two so they support and enable one another. That I think is the magic, because we talk a lot about, in the community, we talk a lot about developer experience and things like that, and user experience, customer experience. And when all of those things align and propel each other forward, I think that's when we really have success as a team.
How do you, because I understand it's kind of a feedback loop that you are proposing here, right? I have my idea of the requirements that might be useful for the users, but I have to talk with them in order to see how they are using the product. Maybe you mentioned finding new ways of using the product that maybe I can potentiate or something like that.
Mhm.
Is there anything specific you do in order to grasp that kind of ideas or to gather more information from them?
Yeah, I think and this happens differently everywhere, right? Because different teams are resourced in different ways. Um, in places that I've worked personally that have done this really well, there's just a great and actively nurtured and maintained and stewarded relationship with a large section of your customer base. So you get different perspectives coming in, and you have to make those perspectives visible to the product teams, and not just the product managers, but the engineers. If you're in a company where the engineers are very detached from what they build, and it's like that, I build this thing, but I don't know how it works. Um, don't listen to anything that I'm saying right now. I'm talking to the people who are really invested. Maybe they, get a little emotional about their work, right? They're passionate about the thing that they build, and they care about their users on the other side. So when you put that kind of insight into the hands of the people who are actually building the software, it becomes much less about designing a user story and writing acceptance criteria. It becomes a much more visceral, tangible thing that empowers your conversations that you're having, like during planning, during design meetings, which hopefully you're doing that cross-functionally. It's really about enabling the conversations and getting the picture of what you're making inside of everyone's head, and making sure that that's aligned, so people can just work and build it and do it. And I think that's one of the nice goals when you're putting together software teams, for sure.
So also paying attention to the emotional flow of the whole team in order to make that magic happens,
Yeah.
right?
It's a feedback loop, like you said, and it's a complicated one. It has lots of twists and turns, but that's life. Yeah.
Interesting. I'd like to take a moment to thank the people at Abstracta for sponsoring and helping me to create this podcast. Abstracta is a company fully dedicated to software testing and software quality that can help you and help your company to push the quality of your products and processes to the next level. What about automation? Because you're working nowadays in a very popular local platform for test automation.
Mhm.
In your perspective, what's the unique value that this type of tools bring to the software testing strategy in your teams, in your
Sure.
customers team?
Yeah. Um, well, at a high level, I think one thing that low code does, and it sounds simple, but low code endeavors to make things easier. And ease is a great thing. So the impact that I see it having on teams, especially teams that are using Mabel, is that for some it's a great equalizer, in that it brings more people to the table to talk about quality. So it gives teams a more centralized platform to get insight about not only what their tests are doing, but their overall strategy. Mabel goes beyond just passing and failing. Reporting and insight, I think, is a major part of the platform. So giving a shared view of that is a good thing, right? Some people call it a single pane of glass. Um, I think most windows have many panes in a lot of companies, so it's hard to have a single one, um, but it at least compartmentalizes different perspectives in a single place, and again gives you a place to observe and drive discussion. So I see teams getting test coverage and maintainable test coverage implemented a lot faster than they were doing before, if they were doing it before. For teams who haven't done automation, I see them having legitimate success a few years into their implementations. I've been at Mabel 4.5 years now, so I've actually gotten to see these things play out in the long term, and it's remarkable, as opposed to say 10 years ago when, it's like, oh, I'm going to try base Selenium, and I'm going to, basically re-implement, something that would now be like a WebDriver IO or a Nightwatch. But, we tried these two. It's like, what wrapper? Is any wrapper going to make this better?
Yeah.
And what I see it helping other teams with as well is the infrastructure side. Not every low code solution does this. I think maybe more than half do. But giving your test a place to run at scale in parallel, and taking the architecture side of that away. Yeah, DevOps teams, I'm sure they love having one less thing to do. I know my last folks were like, wow, you can basically manage this thing yourself. Like, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's empowering, and it is great. So yeah, I see teams just, again, pulling back. It's efficiency, right? They get their testing coverage added faster. Teams that or often teams struggle with getting in sprint testing done. Testing often lags behind a sprint, or things just bleed over, or it's async to the rest of the team. Teams that are using Mabel are actually getting their testing done within the sprint, and so it's all of these workflow things that come together cumulatively that I think really bring the value. That's why we say Mabel is a unified platform for quality engineering. And I think all of those different facets bring their own unique flavors of value that together make a really awesome thing.
Amazing. Something that I can see very quickly is how different people can start using the product. Any type of local solution, and they can start getting value out of it, like in the following day or in the same day, right? That when you are building something with an open source solution, maybe it takes some time until you prepare everything, how you are going to run in parallel, how you are going to present the results or access the test data and everything. That's solved, and you can just log in and start preparing your test and running and getting the results. But a question that I typically hear from different people is, how maintainable is that, or how does this scale when you are trying to run hundreds of tests? There is a different question if that's a good approach to run hundreds, or how many, right? Or measure but this is part of the challenge of many teams. It's like, okay, I have 200 test cases. Is this type of solution going to provide a good maintainability strategy for that many test cases?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we have teams that have, thousands that they run. And a lot of that is one, making sure that, and this is the same in code, right? It's reusability, right? Keeping your test dry. In Mabel, one mechanism that we have for that is called a flow, and a flow is just a set of steps that you group together. Flows can be parameterized with data; they can be looped over. So things that you might, expect to be able to do if you're coming from something that's code based. If you have no idea what these things are, and a lot of folks who have never written code or done any of that, don't understand. They learn it very easily because it's in this low code, cognitively accessible way, to where they understand it. So I think that makes it easier, for teams to not only build but also maintain their tests if there are just things baked into the, whatever solution that you're using that enable that. And if those kinds of things aren't baked into a tool that you're looking at, run away. Because then you'll definitely have to treat, everything as its own unique, special thing. And that's how you end up with a giant mountain of things to maintain.
Yeah.
I think also, You have to be willing to throw tests away at some point. Maybe we're verging from your question a little bit, but this is true, and whether it's low code or no code, right? One caveat: when you make something easier, sometimes that can bring in bad habits. And so at Mabel, we have a super strong customer success team, technical account managers. Our support team answers questions in less than 3 minutes because we know that people have questions and need guidance sometimes. And we know our product best and we see how other teams use it and get value. So we want to reflect that back out to our customer base as well. So I think that help along the way is something that also, gives team success. Um, and then the other aspect of it too, one thing that we're trying to do with Mabel, as I mentioned before, is the unified platform aspect. So we're bringing in, when we started, we were just UI functional testing. We added API testing, then accessibility testing. Now there's performance testing. And so bringing in different modalities into the same place, again, it gives, and the way that we're doing this lets you leverage other tests as well. So it's actually, you're working with a smaller body of tests to get these different insights as well. So reuse, recycle, repurpose, all of these nice things, back to nature,
Yeah.
also matter for your testing strategy too.
That's amazing. And the last time we met, it was in QA or the Highway Conference in Ohio. And I was delivering a talk where I was trying to convey the message of, if you are a tester, you can also learn something of the non-functional aspects like performance, accessibility, and get the advantage of your efforts put on functional testing, and also bring some risks or some issues related to other areas. And this is something that I really like about Naval, which is one of the first tools I know that is bringing the possibility to take advantage of your functional test automation efforts to also gather information related to how we are doing with accessibility in those pages that this test case is visiting, or how can I reuse this for a performance load simulation. So I hope more tools start to follow this approach of having a holistic view of quality, because it's not only functional, or now I only pay attention to performance or to other aspects, right?
Yeah, well, testers care about all of these things, right? Even if you're not doing accessibility testing, right? We often still care about it, or we know about it. And to your point, right? If I wanted to, experiment with adding an accessibility test in Mabel, I can do that in 3 or 4 minutes. I don't have to, go read a ton of documentation, install a bunch of tools, build a tool chain to get all of this to work.
Yeah.
You can just go and do it. And that's, I think, one of the things that low code really brings to this as well, is just UX. Putting a real user and well-designed experience that makes it easier for individuals from whatever stripes you come from or have, being able to do a particular activity and get some value out of it. The great equalizer.
My last question for you today is more related to the future. And I don't know if you have any insights on, what major trends do you anticipate happening in our field, especially nowadays that we are seeing like many things related to AI and machine learning, right?
Sure. Um, Well, I think AI is definitely going to be an increasing part of things. I think right now, a lot of end users' experiences with AI are, based on things like Google Bard or ChatGPT, right? We're, chatting with our little helper. And what I think is going to be very interesting is when we start, I don't know, maybe someone is going to say we're going to start shifting AI left. I'm sure it's going to happen. But when you start having more AI in the back end, right? And you're less concerned with the experience of using the AI, and stuff is just happening, and driving the experiences that we have. I think that's going to be something that will be interesting to watch as it matures. I do see I see generative AI, like the chat GPTs and Google Bards. I do see them helping with a lot of the documentation side of testing for teams that do that. Building test cases. You actually can today, if you go write a basic user story in one of these systems, like it can actually generate decent acceptance criteria and things. And I think all of that is great. GitHub Copilot, generating code, all of it's great. I think it's going to necessitate more testing, just to make sure that all of our friendly helpers are generating the right things. So I think that testing itself is going to adapt and shift to embrace these new technologies. So we'll probably be still testing, but just testing in slightly different ways, perhaps.
It's going to be a very exciting moment for all of us. Very challenging as well, but very exciting. Darrel, thank you so much for all your insights. I'm really glad we had this conversation, and I hope to see you soon.
I hope to see you as well. Thanks so much.
See you in the next episode of Quality Sense Podcast.